Well, lots of controversy coming out of Smith Hill, and of course there's this place called Washington that's a little turbulent as well.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Who's coming, who's going to the inaugural has become a kind of a story here, and we've got a terrific guest to talk about that and more. Professor Richard Arenberg from Brown is back to reflect on what's happening with this inaugural week. In the meantime, we're going to skip our rundown tonight and just kind of focus on that which was the big story yesterday, and that is the state of the state and all that goes along with that. So welcome in. Thanks for joining me tonight. Here's the headline in the Providence Journal. The governor suggests that things are getting stronger. The Speaker of the House didn't go that far. He says they're okay. They're not bad. You know, I'm paraphrasing. WPRI's headline, I think, reflects properly and accurately that there are really two major conversations that come out of this: free college and car tax cuts. Here is the latest on the tuition plan, and then my esteemed guest, Dan McGowan, who's written a 12-piece analysis of that plan, is here to talk about it. We might end up killing each other, but that's okay.
Governor Raimondo rolling out a major proposal to give all Rhode Island high schoolers access to a college degree.
You shouldn't have to be a millionaire to pay for it.
2 free years for all in-state students at any of Rhode Island's public colleges.
You could earn an associate's degree at CCRI for free, or we will pay for the last 2 years of college at URI or Rhode Island College.
The governor says the problem isn't going to college, it's finishing college, and a mountain of debt often awaits those who do. But Raimondo's plan has no income cap, meaning everyone from wealthy to low income could seize on the program.
Many students who go to URI are eligible for financial aid, and I just didn't think it made sense to exclude anyone. The reality is we're making a promise.
Patricia Morgan leads the House Republicans.
I have a lot of misgivings. It's not needs-based and it's not merit-based.
Morgan says the state should be focused on what drives college costs. She also believes the $30 million could go to charter schools, which she says have a proven track record of putting kids on the college path.
What we should be working on is giving children the basics in their K through 12 education first, making sure that system works, is not broken for so many children. When we get that right, then let's look at what else we can do.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a practical response in my judgment. This is a must-read on WPRI.com. 12 key things to know about Governor Raimondo's free college plan. Dan McGowan is the author of that. Is that a stealth authorship, or did you get a byline on that? I was reading that going, who wrote this?
Well, luckily the governor's office wrote it right for me, and then I just put my byline right on it.
Danny and I had a good battle on the radio yesterday about this. If you listen, I would never question the work that you do, but if I felt like the read is important because you lay out the components and the arguments. Do I sense, though, you think this is a good plan?
I think it's a sensible plan. I think it does. I think there are lots of questions that need to be vetted out. There are lots of things that this needs to be discussed in, House Finance and moving forward. But certainly, I cover, aside from covering the city of Providence, I cover education. I really like education issues and things like that. You talk to people time and time again, and they always say college affordability is a major factor for why kids can't finish school, for sometimes why kids don't go to school. This addresses some of that. So it seems like a logical plan. Is it perfect? No, not at all.
I don't see any. Who's got the data that tells me that money makes kids quit? I have not seen that data anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's a tough thing to probably get your fingers wrapped around because, one, who wants to admit that that's why you make it quit? That's why kids would quit. But I think it's a real factor. It was a factor for me in college. I mean, let's be honest. Like, I had to take a year off of school because we didn't have the money to finish. So, I can tell you just...
And look at you.
Sure.
Thriving.
Sure.
You're one of the most respected journalists in the city.
Sure.
So what?
Well, it took having to go back to college. It took having to pay for it. And
here's the thing.
Take on a lot of debt.
I don't want anybody to get the impression, because Dan and I are kind of in the middle of the argument, because this argument's been 2 days long now since the governor put this thing out. You're going to find this to be, this whole conversation ends up being counterintuitive to whatever philosophies that you have, because I am in support of, if there needs to be some more financial aidishness into the college experience for Rhode Islanders, I support that concept. Right. But laying out a no charge for junior and senior year, you know, once you pick your nose and get 2.0 undeclared, then you declare a major. And you know, at $13,000 at URI and $9,000 at Rick, you're now going to be for the bubble. What are you kidding me?
But so flip it around though. You give more financial aid and a kid stumbles through college.
We've always been a needs-based culture this
Sure.
way. I'm willing to see that we continue some kind of needs-based discussion here. But as I said yesterday, I'm a URI dad. Disclosure. I'll write a check for $7,000 next week for next semester, or $6,000, whatever the number is. 2 years from now, the guy who's in my same place goes, "Ha ha! You're kind of write the check. I don't."
Right.
Well, for what is the net purposefulness of that?
That's the. I completely agree that's where this conversation is going to. There's going to be an issue, and more importantly, with all respect to you, more importantly than you, the number of people who
important than me.
That's right. Who at 19 or 20 are emailing me and saying, "Hey, I didn't go to school because I didn't have the money. What about me?" That's a very legitimate point. I wonder if it's going to be something that maybe will be tweaked. I don't know. But I've heard from a lot of people that feel that way. That said,
they feel that they didn't go to school because they didn't have the money.
Or didn't have, so right, that's the...
There's a lot of financial aid out
but
there.
My point being...
A place like Rick is the best return on investment that you can find around here. Yeah. I mean, who's kidding who?
Sure, I think that's true. But again, it's easy for us to say who are professionals and have jobs when you have when you don't have the money to go and you don't have parents who are saving for college. I think that's a real factor. Now, to your point, does it potentially get addressed by giving more financial aid to poorer families? But sure, maybe that's what comes out of it.
I hope so. I'm open-minded to that. I mean, but the idea that if I was 2 years behind, my kid was now entering freshman year rather than leaving this semester as a senior.
Would you feel differently?
I take that $27,000 of cumulative tuition, invest it, and end up it's worth $100,000 to me in retirement. Now, what is the indiscriminate nature of deciding when that starts and when it doesn't? Well, where is the big philosophy here?
So I asked the governor's office when I got briefed on that, because I sensed obviously that was going to be a question. Their response was 12th grade, current 12th graders is a sort of natural line in the sand, because again, for your daughter who's 20, 21 years old, let's say you cut off at 21 years old right now. The 22-year-olds are going to be upset. At least high school is the current class.
Well, it speaks to the stupidity of the plan that you have to go, well, where do we start this stupid plan?
Right.
You don't start this stupid plan.
So you just give incentives.
It's the dumbest thing that's ever come out of the governor's mouth and out of state government. It is completely insane.
So are you more
It is
likely...
about scoring points, getting reelected, and beating Andrew Cuomo to the punch.
Well, so here's the question,
It's got nothing to do with valid policy.
Do you think Andrew Cuomo's idea is a better one, which is helping middle class and poor families? So you think that's the way to go?
Well, I think there's always been a needs-based conversation that we need to have here. But across the board, guess what? We're going to wipe the and by the way, for the kid like you, who maybe had to take a break, not for financial reasons, but for academic reasons, sure. Guess what? They're off the spec.
Yeah.
So if they say something happens with the family, and I got to pull out for senior year, guess what? You'll pay for that senior year if you have to go the fifth year.
Well, you're rolling the dice by that third and fourth year. I'm telling you, I think
it's the dumbest plan
largely,
I've ever seen.
We're going to see a lot of lower income kids take the CCRI route, which is the safer route to take, and I think that will be beneficial.
And a great route to take with or without the freeness, because CCRI provides a really good quality.
So what about if we just do free community college then? What do you think that's a better idea?
I think that's something that ought to be legitimately discussed.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
I think right now that for kids who don't know what they want to do, but who want to be four-year college degree earners, get your egos out of your way and go to CCRI for a couple of years, and then end up at
which is the biggest factor. A lot of kids don't want to go to CCRI because it's CCRI. No disrespect to them.
We have to stop joking about CCRI.
Absolutely.
And I don't want anybody to get the impression that I don't think there's value here. And then there's the whole value conversation. You make something no charge, all of a sudden it's value and its marketability.
The GI Bill didn't do that though, right?
The GI Bill was recipient specific. This is
a
not
large group of
recipient
people.
specific. This is anybody who walks, talks,
But
breathes,
it allowed,
and burps
it
can
allowed
go ahead
lots
for no
of people
charge.
to be able to go to college that wouldn't have gone to college otherwise.
Can you see that this conversation is only just starting with my good friend Dan McGowan? I don't think we've ever had one of these.
No.
You know what it is? Your life experience and where you are in life and where I am in life advise
Little
our
different, yeah.
dispositions on this.
And I should say, look, don't think that I'm ever, this is not,
I
think
can't
it's
wait
a lot.
for 20 years from now when
Right.
you're a national star in
No, it might make me stay in
journalism
Rhode
and
Island
you're
now.
writing and you're writing the check for your kids and you see these inequities and you want to remember that old Dan York was right 20 years ago.
I
or
always say
whatever.
that anyway. Dan.
Yeah, right. We needed more on this. Come back, okay?
Absolutely, of course.
Professor Arenberg will bring some peace to this conversation when we come back. Stay with us.
Let me just say that the 45 colleagues who are not going are people who I have tremendous respect for. And I think some people think the best way and the most powerful statement that you can make in opposition to the incoming administration and the policies that he has articulated and what he's done in his transition is to boycott or not be present. I think it's a very powerful statement. I understand why they're doing it. I think for me, the reason it's important to go is I think it's my responsibility as a federal official. This is an oath of office of our president. I have respect to the office, not necessarily because of any respect for the individual. But I also want Donald Trump to know that a group of us in the Congress are going to be there from the moment he begins his work to hold him accountable, to be able to know that he has a fight on his hands, and to not really abandon the field to the guy.
That's David Cicilline from last night talking about Congress. There's some 45 members so far that are saying they're not showing up on Friday. However, the Senate, different perspective. Look at this. Why are senators boycotting the inauguration? National ambition is part of it, reads the headline in the Washington Post. Professor Richard Arenberg from Brown University, who lectures on international and public affairs and who was as shocked and surprised as anybody that Donald Trump became the president. We've gone through that exercise, so we don't have to do that anymore. Right. Welcome, my friend. Happy New Year. Thanks for coming in. Good to see you. You have vast experience on Capitol Hill, having worked in some pretty top spots, even on the Senate side. Why are senators different from congressmen in this dynamic? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I do think that there is something to be said for the fact that they're mostly national figures. And that they tend to take a broader long-term perspective. It's part of the design for the difference between the Senate and the House.
Sure.
By the way, I admire anybody who has an active conscience, decides that this is how they want to express their opposition. At the same time, I think this is a very important event every 4 years in our history. And particularly when it demonstrates the peaceful transition of government, it's important to the United States, it's important to the world, and I think it's a very valid thing to say, as the congressman did, that as a public official, I want to show respect for the office.
It's interesting that you make a really intriguing point about senators having more of a national role. A lot of senators have national ambition.
Right.
Right? So why give yourself a bunch of agita for stuff you don't, the higher the office sometimes, maybe Donald Trump has changed this dynamic as well, but at least it used to be, the higher the office, the more cautious you are.
Yeah.
Right? The higher your ambition, the more careful you become. And then we have the conversation about our own governor, who is not going. I don't know that we have a mandated cultural tradition for state governors to go, but most of them always go.
Yes.
She's not going, and she would have tripped over herself trying to get there for Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. So the notion that she's too busy working on problems is laughable on its face, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a statement that's it's why I framed it as the office versus the man, because I think the statement of the decision not to go to the inauguration is directed at Donald Trump specifically as an individual. And I think, kind of fuzzing that up, You know, I don't get that. I mean,
Well, you know, just throw me John Lewis's cut, because this is what started the whole thing, really, for the most part, over the, you know, just
Right.
prior to the weekend on Meet the Press. Here's what the iconic John Lewis had to say.
I believe in forgiveness. I believe in trying to work with people. It's going to be hard. It's going to be very difficult. I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
You do not consider him a legitimate president. Why is that?
I think the Russians participated in helping this man get elected, and they helped destroy the candidacy of Hillary Clinton.
First, do you believe that?
I wish he hadn't framed it in terms of legitimacy.
But talk to me
Yeah.
about do you believe the Russians more or less killed off Hillary Clinton's election campaign?
You know, I don't think there's the evidence to say anything quite that strong. Obviously, I mean, I think certainly the intelligence community believes pretty uniformly that that the Russians were attempting to help Donald Trump,
Right.
and they certainly didn't hurt him. And in an election which, in fact, no matter what Donald Trump says, this was a very close election. In fact, you know, she got 3 million more votes than he did. But in a close election, you can point, and people do,
Lots of
you can
things.
point to lots of different reasons.
So the legitimacy question, I mean, you know, this thing kind of gets rolling based on what John Lewis did.
Yeah.
And everyone has kind of started to peel off. What do you think the momentum really is with 45 plus Democrats, and maybe more by Friday? Is it John Lewis and his independent thinking on this, or Donald Trump's antagonism of John Lewis afterwards, tweeting diminishing comments about a guy who, no matter what he said here, has broad respect and such affection all across this country?
I think
Which
it's
do you
the
think
latter.
it is?
I think it's the latter. I think it's the reaction to John Lewis. And, you know, one of, in my judgment, many foolish tweets that the president-elect has exercised going into this pre-inaugural period. But now, let me just say this, that we've all been speculating about Trump going back quite a long time, but at least since Election Day, about what he'll do, what he might do. Actually, there's a much bigger question mark about what he'll actually do than any incoming president that I can remember. But starting 2 days from now, he has to act. And acting is obviously very different than talking.
Well, I would think if he had said, gee, Congressman Lewis, we'll miss you, hope you reconsider, America loves you, I think maybe 2 or 3 others join John Lewis.
Yeah.
You know, 40 plus, because, you know, he just kind of punched him in the nose and just didn't let him be where he wanted to be. And, you know, will that advise the Trump presidency going forward? You know, the professor asked a good question. I wonder if he's got the answer, because I know I don't. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. All right, so do you have an answer to the question? I don't know, a level of, I'm not going to use the term presidentiality anymore, because it seems like it's you know, banging your head against the wall. Will there be a maturity, you think, that will develop in Donald Trump in terms of this need to fight and bury anybody that crosses him?
It's very hard to answer that question.
And if he doesn't change, what happens to this country, and what happens?
I think it's very dangerous. I mean, you know, to have a president of the United States kind of careening around on the basis of instantaneous judgments, very reactive to other people and perceived insults and all of that, I think that puts us on a very dangerous footing.
You're a veteran of Capitol Hill. You know that culture as well as anybody in southern New England, that's for sure. Will there be a bifurcated reality in Washington, that which is how Donald Trump comports himself and maybe makes some key decisions on his own, but establishment politics as we know it today still rules the day, where the Senate more or less comports itself in a same kind of establishment role. I'm not saying establishment's a dirty word, by the way. And his cabinet assumes a kind of maturity and surrounds and nearly suffocates his antics. What do you think?
Yeah, I tend toward believing that. I mean, I think that
out of hope or out of projection?
Well, no, I think certainly Capitol Hill, depending on how he comports himself, what he wants to do in terms of actually being aggressive in terms of his legislative agenda, it may be a very short-lived honeymoon that he has with the Republican majority, both in the House but particularly in the Senate, depending on actions. That's that's why I put such an emphasis on the fact, starting 2 days from now, he's going to begin to act. And one thing about actions is that they create reactions, they create restraints going into the future. If you do something, that impacts what you could then do next. If you repeal Obamacare, well then, the range of things that you can do is suddenly constrained.
Well, the Senate wants to do that. I mean, we'll see what this really works out to. I mean, I think if President Obama, who had a press conference today prior to our broadcast, if he just said, listen, will you stop calling it Obamacare, please? I would like to be off this legacy, not because I don't think I did good work, but because if it keeps being a litmus test on me, I think the politics get in the way. Call it the Affordable Care Act. Call it anything. Just don't. It doesn't have to call me Johnson. You don't have to call me Obama. Maybe that soothes everybody, because I think a lot of the components Republicans want reflect what are already in there with some adjustments. Yes. I mean, who knows? I don't know.
Well, the dirty little secret is Obamacare was the Republican plan.
Yeah.
That's why it's so difficult for them to come up with a substitute plan.
And isn't identity politics really difficult now? Because it's hard to figure out, on traditional philosophical and party lines and ideology and all that kind of stuff. It's actually hard to figure out who's who and who's what, because the whole thing's it all seems like this now.
Yeah, well, certainly, as long as the focus is on the president-elect, that's true, because nobody knows how. Nobody can quite put their finger on what he is.
Any chance that a guy who goes in there thinking he's the boss and who's acting in some kind of totalitarian fashion hurts himself so badly that he actually magnifies the impact of the legislative branch, that he actually ends up minimizing his capacity?
He may very well do that. And in fact, it may happen even without his going that far. I mean, what we have on Capitol Hill is a legislative majority that's been, champing at the bit now for years. They've got legislative language, all over the shelves and in their desk drawers and everything. They're ready to go.
Yeah.
And the question is, if Ryan and McConnell and the leadership on Capitol Hill begins to start moving legislation and sending it to Trump's desk, well, what's he going to do? Start vetoing things? I doubt it.
To be determined.
Yeah.
For all of us. Even the real smart guys don't have the answers.
Well.
Final word and we come back. Stay with us. Really am fired up about that free tuition thing. Just one of the worst things I've ever seen come out of the State House, and Gina Raimondo is going to own it until they take it away from her. We'll see how that goes. The Invenergy plant, the power plant in Burrowville, lots going on with that tomorrow.